what I want to help parents do is to actually strive a little bit less, to have more ease and things like that, because that's one of the major ways that we can be more present with our kids is to just you practice ease, practice being present, practice relaxing into the present moment. And that's an incredibly positive thing for you to do for you and your kids is to not strive so much and enjoy your life more.
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for us parents to seek the same in our own lives while striving to be the best versions of ourselves each day. No matter who you are or where you came from, with increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show is Raising Good Humans Every Day with Hunter Clarke-Fields. Hunter is a mindfulness mentor, Mindful Mama podcast host, global speaker, #1 best-selling author of Raising Good Humans, mindfulness meditation teacher, and creator of the Mindful Parenting course and teacher training. And she is the author of her very new book, Raising Good Humans Every Day, 50 Simple Ways to Press Pause, Stay Present, and Connect with Your Kids. Hunter has over 20 years of experience in meditation and yoga practices and has taught mindfulness to thousands worldwide. She presents on parenting, is a certified teacher of parent effectiveness training, and helps moms bring more calm and family cooperation into their daily lives. Hunter is the mother of 2 active daughters who challenge her every day to hone her craft. Her work has appeared in CNBC Make It, Parade, Motherhood Moment, The Hollywood Digest, ABC Portland, NBC Milwaukee, CBS South Bend, Kansas Public Radio, and many, many podcasts. And interestingly, as part of her own self-care, she loves to do Scottish country dancing. Hunter, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I love Scottish country dancing. I don't do it, but I love watching it. Actually, I pretend to do it. That's an old joke in our family. Okay, but we move on. I want to tell you congratulations on your latest book. And I loved your first book. And this book, I'm sure by design and no surprise, it was like reading a book of meditations for increased awareness and parenting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, by design. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As a podcaster, people send me books, and sometimes I get these like 300-page tomes about parenting. And I'm like, what parent ever has time to read this? Like I never would. And I really love books where things like daily reminder books or these short things. And so Raising Good Humans Every Day is deliberately designed to have these 50 short chapters. And like you can finish a chapter in 3 to 4 pages and like accomplish something kind of at the end of the day before you go to bed or in the morning when you wake up. And it's designed to give parents like a sense of accomplishment. It really does and really distill all this, all these teachings and things down to like the real essentials in a palatable way. That's what I want, just to make it easy to learn a lot of stuff.
And it did. It absolutely did that. And it's funny you should say to feel accomplished, because being that podcaster who reads lots of these very big books, it was so refreshing to be able to, okay, I'm going to take on numbers 1 through 10 or 1 through 5 right now. Or just, there's always a nice place to stop and to think, right? Where you're not feeling like, oh, do I need 10 more pages to get to the end of this chapter? And, I find myself at times like rushing through things. This was like, you could just sit with it and time to pause and to really think about your words, because they are synthesized in a way that it is not overwhelming, which I know is one of your life goals, is to help people not feel overwhelmed in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because we all go like we read the parenting books because we want to be better parents, and we're all like, there's so many parents that are out there who are striving to be better and do better, and that striving in itself can be detrimental, right? Because we're trying too hard. We don't feel like we're good
Hmm.
enough unless we're perfect at doing things perfectly. We know so many things, and what I want to help parents do is to actually strive a little bit less, to have more ease and things like that, because that's one of the major ways that we can be more present with our kids, is to just you practice that, practice ease, practice being present, practice relaxing into the present moment. And that's an incredibly positive thing for you to do for you and your kids,
Hmm.
is to not strive so much and enjoy your life more.
Sounds so wonderful. That's so wonderful.
easier
Okay, that's yeah, yes. But we're putting that out
easier
there
said
for
than done.
everyone. All you wonderful, hardworking parents out there. This is what this show is about. We are going to work on settling in, being present, and non-striving. Now, I love how you open up the book with the quote from Hal Runkel, because this is, I think, the first thing that we need to talk about is the pressure that parents have, whether it's social media, whether it's their own internal pressure or culture, to do, to be, to raise, to achieve. It's like it's a total setup. And so the quote is from Hal Runkel: parents feel overstretched, overcommitted, underprepared, and underappreciated. Like, so let's just start there, everyone. Like, right? Like, this is it a lot of the time. It's not always like wonderful. And oh my God, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Like, yes, we have those moments, and hopefully in the big picture, we feel that way. But on the day to day, moment to moment of raising little ones to older ones, it is a really tough job.
Yeah, I think the deck is stacked against us, particularly if you live in the United States, where we have zero support for new parents. I know a couple of my next door neighbors have a new baby right now, and it's so hard. You're two people in a house with this one. It really, like, it would be so ideal. We did evolve, right, to have a village, to have a bunch of people, and we don't. We have very little support. We have very little safety net. So the jobs are very important. And then there's a lot of stress out there. But then also there's the stress of like, A, that this early period is incredibly important for their development and things like that. And then B, like you want to do it right. Of course, you don't want to mess up your kids, and it's a setup
Hmm.
for, and also the piece about this idea that you should enjoy every moment, like grandma you walk by on the street, like, enjoy every moment. And I remember
Right.
wanting to like strangle these women, like,
Right.
are you kidding me? Do you know the kind of stress I'm under?
Yeah.
And the pressure to enjoy every moment can be incredibly frustrating. Just the lack of acknowledgement of how hard it is can be really frustrating, because it's all of those things. It's a whole intense jumble that we could do a lot better in supporting parents, I think.
Yes, yes. I paused at that part of your book when you write about the older people who say enjoy every minute, enjoy every moment, and I was like, okay, what do I now say to young parents? Now that
I
ours are
know.
older and I have some gray in my beard and my hair, and so I have shifted it to it goes fast. Something like just I
Yeah,
want to like
yeah.
I do feel an obligation as we know, we don't get the memos from
Hmm.
our kids. My wife and I were just talking about this with some family. Like, no one, like our kid doesn't say, "I'm not going to sleep with you anymore." But tomorrow,
Hmm.
I'm never going to sleep with you again. Or actually, I'm just
Hmm.
letting you know, in 2 weeks, you're never going to read me a story in bed ever again. Or
Oh, so heartbreaking.
yeah, I'm done holding
Yeah.
your hand in public, and in a little while after that, I'm never going to hold your hand. It's like these things
Yeah.
happen, and so it's not like enjoy every moment, but when it
Hmm.
does go fast, and this is about the mindfulness, right? Try to be present to these moments, even when a lot of them are not blissful.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't just like turn. off. It's like we can't selectively numb our feelings, right? Like if we numb or distract ourselves away from all the bad moments, then we're not going to be able to be present for the good moments. And I describe in one chapter like a scene of like a parent walking through a park with their child, and like it can look the exact same way from the outside, but in one scenario, you feel the early spring breeze, you feel your child's warm hand and your cool hand, they want to go look at a bug, you go together and marvel at this bug together, and it's this very enjoyable, present, simple, everyday moment. But then for a lot of us, this moment looks like you're worried about, an email that came in, was coming in earlier about your older son. You're caught in rumination. You kind of tug your child along. Come on, we got to get going. They want to go see the bug. You say, okay, and you check your phone to see if a new email came in, and you completely blind to the whole thing, and it's just a moment full of stress. And the thing is like that we are in this autopilot mode so often, and that is the key. I mean, when we, as these older parents, my daughters are 16 and 13 now, and I'm amazed at how fast it feels like they were just 7 and 5 a while ago, just a minute ago. But anyway, it does go so fast. So we want to impart that, but in the way to be there, right, for those moments is to practice really being there. Like we can't like stack our to-do list to get to that moment, like when we're on the vacation, and then when we get to that moment, our brains can't settle down, our attention can't settle down because we've practiced going and going and going and going. We have to practice stopping and being and bringing our attention here and now every day, so that then when we get to those moments, we can actually be there. Otherwise, the habit energy of just the next thing and the next thing and distraction just carries us away 95% of the time of our life.
Well, and you talk about like two main things that we can control. Like we don't have any control over these little people, which we'll talk about soon, or a lot of stuff that happens in the world. But we do have a degree of control over our environment. Like you said, like not overstacking, how do we set up our environment, our day, our schedule, and our behavior, all about how we act and react. And with those two main categories, there is a lot of empowerment in there about, like, because I think we feel like, like we have like no control in our life. We're like just blowing in the wind. But I think we can shift that to we actually can manage the things that we can manage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to realize, what you have agency over. And it's funny because some of those things, like I remember thinking, wow, I have so little control over myself when my temper was like really bad. It wasn't like something I was like, I would really love to scream at my kids. It wasn't something I was signing up for and consciously choosing. Right. So we really don't have any control over our kids. They have their own minds and hearts. We see that very, very soon. They are not puppets, and, so what do we have control over? And how can we expand on those things, right? So if we're a model for our kids, what do we want to model? And those are really some aha moments for me. Like we're, thinking about, okay, having those mirror moments with our kids. Like I remember when my youngest daughter was a baby. My oldest daughter was maybe 3 or 4. And the baby she knocked down something in the playroom, and the older daughter starts barking orders at her. And what did you do? Put that back. Ba, ba, ba. And I was like, oh, wow. That's what I sound like. Oh my goodness. And it was a big wake up moment for me for those communication skills. But I was like, okay, this I do have some agency over. I can't make different words come out of her mouth, but obviously she's modeling, mimicking what's coming out of my mouth. So that's really the place where I have agency to make change.
You said in the book, isn't it strange that we're asking our kids to calm down when we can't? And so true. And I had this flash image of a situation when our oldest was probably 7, siblings would have been 5 and 3, and she is yelling at one of them. I can't remember. And my wife and I, one or both of us, are yelling at her to stop yelling at them. And she just stops and she looks at us and she's like, "Why are you yelling at me to stop yelling at them?" And I remember it was
brilliant.
like bullseye. I just like stopped. We looked at each other. We're like, "Oh, we need to regroup. We need to totally regroup."
Dude,
out of the
I've
mouths of
been there.
babes, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. What a great teacher your child was.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Wake up, parents. What's wrong with you?
Totally.
That's great. But yeah, I mean, a lot of us don't have the child who says that to us so clearly, but it is something, we should all have that child, because it really makes so little sense that we're just, our way of trying to exercise our agency is by getting louder and scarier and bigger, because that's what was modeled for us, right? Those parents who got louder and scarier and bigger to make us comply. And so that's just like kind of that's what I like to call it, a habit energy, right? Like it's like, it's in there deep, I know that my default is like, I can hear the threats forming in my brain. I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's like this, when we start to realize, oh, our kids, what they need in the difficult moments is they need to learn, right? They need to learn something. And when we are loud and we are scary, what we're doing is scaring them. And their stress response, their fight, flight, or freeze stress response gets activated. And so a lot of the behaviors that we see that we don't like and don't want are fight, flight, or freeze, yelling, kicking, spitting, hitting, running away. All of these things are fight, flight, or freeze responses. And we know that fight, flight, or freeze cuts off access to the slower processing parts of the brain. So whatever it is we want our kid to learn in that moment, maybe we want our kid to learn a better way to communicate with their sibling. They're not going to learn it. They're not, we're not teaching them anything. We're just modeling the more power wins solution. And that's not terribly skillful or effective, right?
No. And what you said just made me think about, we're here to teach them. And as you write about, disciple, right? Disciple is to teach, not to punish. Discipline is to teach, not to punish. Disciple is a student. And so I'm thinking about all these parenting moments that we go through, where I think a lot of times we're just thinking, I just want them to stop, or I just need to get out the door, and when we're talking about mindfulness and presence and intentional parenting, conscious parenting, we probably have to stop and think, is this a teaching moment, or is this I just need to get through this moment? And I wonder, your thoughts about, can there be those different kind of moments which would then you'd hopefully step into different types of purposeful behavior instead of reactivity?
Sure. I mean, yeah, of course, there's all these different types of moments, but I think the main point that we need to remember as parents is that our reactivity doesn't really help any of those moments, regardless of what type it is, whether you're just trying to get out the door, whether you're trying to teach anything. It's going to take longer and be more difficult when we're reactive in general, right? I'm not saying there's never a moment for parents to use power, right? Like that, there may be those moments, like, that they exist. But us being reactive in general, it just doesn't help any moment, because then it cuts off, for us, it cuts off access to the slower parts of our brain, and we can't be thoughtful. So for instance, say there is a moment of like, I just need to get out the door, right? Screaming at our kid to get out the door is one way to do it. But then we have the aftermath of the difficulty and the resentment and the loudness and the crying in the car and all of these things that actually take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of
Yeah.
energy
Mm-hmm.
to handle. Whereas then if we can take that energy and effort and put it into the front end, right? I think a lot of mindful parenting, conscious parenting, it requires us to do a lot of effort in the front end, particularly when our
Mm-hmm.
kids are little, when our kids are small, and then we get payoff. Because actually, I would say for me, parenting has gotten easier and easier as my kids have. It's great. I love raising teenagers now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
amazed to be saying this, but anyway, there's we have to invest that energy in
Yeah.
the front
Yeah.
end, because then if we're trying to get out the door and we can say, oh, I'm starting to feel so frustrated, I have to go, and that can help lower our reactivity, lower our temperature. And then maybe I might like put a hand on my heart, crouch down, and okay, I'm feeling reactive. What do I need? What does he need? I need to get out the door. He's upset because of the shoes. Okay. Looks like I need to get out the door. Looks like you're upset because of the shoes. And this is like a mindfulness tool. In mindfulness, we call it noting, right? But it's just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging and describing what's happening in the moment. And when we do that, helps lower the temperature, because it's like not all these like alarmist thoughts in our head. It's like, non-judgmental thoughts out in the air between you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you can acknowledge those. What can we do about this situation? And sometimes like that kind of thing can take like 30 seconds. It can take up, maybe 2 minutes. But if we imagine just investing that time and effort into the front end of empathizing with our child, taking the emotional temperature down between ourselves and our kids, it's probably more effective, even like with timing, to get out the door than the screaming is. And even if it took a
Yeah.
little longer, it's going to take shorter in the future. So it's
Right.
kind of an
Right.
investment in the front end.
And everyone's going to feel better. I mean, how many
Yeah.
I was on morning drop off in the elementary school days, and it was easier with one than it was with two, and especially with three. And
Ooh.
you know, like the kids get, the yelling and impatience getting out the door, and then that's what happens in the car because they're dysregulated, and then there's drop off and they have their own anxieties or whatever about the day, and then there's quiet. And I just remember feeling like, oh, that felt so bad. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
dysregulated, I feel guilty. And when I started practicing some of these things, trying to practice what I was preaching in my office with the parents I was working with, it's amazing how it is flipping the mindset, because it feels like, instead of, a lot of people just want to be themselves, and being themselves is not thinking exactly what their child needs and just reacting with how they feel in the moment, and that feels
Mm.
easier. But to your point, it's not easier. It actually, things get drawn out, emotions run high, and if we can stop and pause and think about the situation, think about the forest or the trees. Like, what's the big picture here? What's the detail? How do I want this to go? How much time do I have? So, what if we're a few minutes late and we all feel good? Like, if we can stop, to your point, the front loading can make such a huge difference, not in that moment or just a moment or the day, but it's the ripple effect as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have to get into those moments and realize, like, is this an emergency? That's what our brain wants,
Right.
our nervous system
Yeah.
wants us to think, like, there is a threat. This is an emergency. And it might be true. Like, being on time to your job may be really incredibly important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to sit back and say, well, what would actually happen if I were
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes late? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of walk yourself back through that and kind of see what that worst case scenario is. Cause yeah, our brains are at their worst when we're panicked. So if we
Yeah.
can at any way get ourselves out of emergency response mode and into a more skillful mode, everything's going
Mm-hmm.
to go better.
Mm-hmm. So there are those of us who come by perfectionism and perfectionistic thinking naturally, raising my hand. And there are the rest of us who I think have cultural and social media induced perfectionistic thinking, like just all this pressure about everyone looking so nice and having these wonderful days and exploration, like the presentation. Now, so I'm leading up to parenthood is messy, and you bring up a wonderful example with one of our greatest teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, and no mud, no lotus. No mud, no lotus. So please enlighten us about this wonderful concept.
I love the concept of no mud, no lotus. And basically, it comes from the Zen master and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh. He was nominated in the 60s for Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King Jr., a real incredible person for bringing mindfulness to the United States and the West. But his teaching was this, that the lotus, which is the beautiful smelling flower, the symbol of enlightenment and joy and compassion, there has to be muck, dark, gooey, black, disgusting muck at the bottom of the pond for it to grow and thrive and prosper. And, it's the same, like we could use the analogy of like a garden, right? Like we know if we're gardeners that if you want to have good cucumbers, you need some cow poop and rotten vegetables and disgusting, nasty stuff to kind of grow through. And this is kind of this analogy for us. And the truth is, like, we need our difficulties. We're going to have them. We're going to, we just don't get through life without the difficulties, the challenges. It is hard to be a conscious human being on this earth. And so you're going to have these challenges. And what do you do with them, right? Do you say, oh, my life is terrible because of these challenges? No. I mean, what you want to do is use them to be your teachers and use that as your compost for you to grow a beautiful flower of compassion and understanding for yourself, for other people. I mean, if you were perfect and you had made no mistakes in your life, you would be an insufferable human being high on your pedestal, judging all of us and wondering what's wrong with all of you. And your kids would feel terrible because they would be like, I'm a normal human being and my parent is so perfect, right? So we need these difficulties. They're inevitable. So instead, can we say, all right, they're my teacher. What am I learning from them? What can I learn from the things that are hard for me, like my anger? What can I learn from, that moment where I freaked out in the car at drop off and I yelled at everybody? I can learn this is the mud that's going to help me have this lotus of compassion, where I can learn that I'm going to take more time in the morning. I'm going to take some time to stop and breathe and calm my nervous system before I leave in the morning. I'm going to pause in the car and practice taking 3 deep breaths before I start the engine and leave the driveway, just to remind my whole body, mind system that there's not an emergency. So these are the things that can teach us. And I love that. I mean, I want it on a t-shirt, no mud, no lotus. It's so helpful. Like we're human. We gotta,
you know what? Merch. That's Mindful Mama merch right there. That I like that. Yeah. First of all, I like the thought of all of the imperfections and the difficulties and things that didn't work, how that is the compost. I really like that concept. The compost, right? That's the compost, the fertilizer to help things grow. And you talk about there are teachers, our kids are our teachers. And I know for my wife and I, when we became aware at some point that our kids were our greatest teachers, it actually also shifted our mindset from, we need to be in charge. We need to know everything. We're supposed to do things right. Like we're supposed to be in control of this chaos. It's like, it's a setup again. It's a setup mentality for just distress and inner turmoil and frustration and irritability and reactivity. The idea that like they're human beings on their own path, here to teach us. And we're on our own path as well. And we're just a little farther along in the human experience. But we're all in this together. And this is a whole big mystery. And this is us all growing together. there's just something different about that mentality and mindset coming into a situation than the more traditional one.
Yeah, I mean, when you give yourself permission to be imperfect, give yourself permission to be human, that oddly enough, like, it's kinda weirdly paradoxically helpful. Like, it's like the idea of just accepting your humanity, accepting your mistakes, accepting your mud. It makes it easier to just relax and be at ease, and then use your whole brain and be more present and actually m do better, objectively than maybe you were when you were trying so hard to be perfect and punishing yourself with mean, harsh voice inside your head when you messed up. It's paradoxical that as you strive a little less, you relax and do a little better.
Mhm. Mhm. An important awareness for us to have, as you write about, is our triggers. And
Mm.
you can't be a human being raised by other humans in our society and not have one to several triggers.
Yeah.
So tell us about how you see triggers and how your strategies for identifying them and then what to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just, talking about this with Gabor Mate, right, who writes about triggers, like, that our traumas, even these, like, kinda small t traumas, they're like
Mhm.
these hurts that were never healed, basically, and they kind of just have riding along with us, and w we all have them, and a lot of us say, like, I say I've had this normal, pretty happy childhood, and yet I have these small t traumas. Like, I was spanked as a kid, and I was, that was scary, and
Mhm.
I couldn't talk to anybody about it because the people I wanted to talk to about it were maybe the ones who were doing that,
Right.
right? And that's very
Mhm.
normal, right? Like, that's normalized in our society. So there's a lot of things that will come up as we come back into this parent-child relationship that we're not going to realize until we're in it, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But it really helps to again, like, take these difficulties and understand them. I remember when my temper was really bad and my daughter was, like, just about 2 years old, and I'd yell at her and I scared her, and I remember, her crying in her room and me crying on the floor outside the hallway, and just saying, just feeling like I was a terrible parent and realizing, like, "Okay, well, this is a mess. I'm incapacitated. This is, like, about the lowest it can get. What do I need to learn here? What am I gonna learn from this moment?" I had to look at myself and say, okay, why does when she get why do her big feelings trigger me, right?
Mhm.
Why do they feel unacceptable in my body? Like, I can feel that it feels like this is
Mhm.
so wrong, it's unacceptable, it has to stop, right? Like,
Mhm.
why does it feel like that in my body? So I had to it really helped to look back into my own childhood and say, "Oh, this is exactly what happened to me." When I had those big feelings, I got I got
Mhm.
hit, right? It was scary.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I learned a really deep in my cells lesson that was unacceptable. And so therefore I'm back in this moment and here it is again. And I could see this like a pattern going back through the generations of my family. And this understanding of it, of just seeing it as this generational pattern, seeing this trigger and having this understanding of it, it helped me to work with it, because we can't work with what we can't see. If we don't look at it, it's this idea of walking with your shadow in front of you. If your shadow is behind you, it's big, it's scary. You're going forward to run away from it, and yet it's always there and it's getting bigger and it's frightening you. But if you take your shadow, your trigger, you walk with your shadow in front of you, you're like, okay, it's there. I'm dealing with it. I'm working with it. I'm working to understand it. And it makes it so that then you can start to like engage tools to say,
Mhm.
oh, okay, hello, temper, hello, feeling of unacceptableness. It feels horrible to be in this moment, but I don't have to scream, so we can work with it then. And I've
Mhm.
done this with mindful parenting. I've had people who say like, like, oh, my toddler spilling juice makes me go off the walls. And
Hmm.
like we do all these questions to understand how you were parented and how you were raised. And she was like, oh, now I understand. It's because appearance was so important to my parents. And this idea now of my household being perfect is this whole thing for me, right? And she had to like look
Hmm.
back into her childhood to uncover that. And I think that
Hmm.
that can be really valuable. It's not like anything we're like, oh, please, I'd like to like go back, look in my childhood. We don't want to sign up for that assignment, but it's
Right.
much better to carry our own baggage than to pass it on to our kids.
Yes, indeed. It really is. I'm uh as I'm watching you speak, there's a few things that others can't see, so I want to highlight them. When you were doing the mantra, like I'm in this moment right now, you were sort of closing your eyes and rubbing like just above your eyebrows. And then earlier, when you were talking about regulating outside the door with your child and your hand over your heart. So tell us a little bit about, from a actual movement and regulation, some of these techniques that can help people ground
Hmm.
in these active reactive moments.
Sure. That's great that, you notice that. I mean, because mindfulness is really about embodiment, has this word mindfulness, right? That's our Western translation, but it really is about embodiment, and it's about the sensations we feel in our body. And those are the things, our feelings, right? Are of these sensations we feel in our body. Our stress is like, for me, it's like a tightness in my chest, a funny, weird sensation in my throat, and all of that. And as we learn, a part of a mindfulness practice is sitting and looking and taking this time for awareness of what am I feeling in my body sensations, and then not reacting to them, whatever they are, right? So you may feel tingling in your hands, you may feel tightness in your chest, you may feel pulsing and all these different sensations in your body. And you practice to just be aware of them and not react to them. And so then when I find that helpful for when we get into a moment of reactivity, then we can have been through like feeling uncomfortable sensations, and we've practiced not reacting to them. But some of the things, like you saw me put a hand to the heart, like that's for me, and for a lot of
Hmm.
people, that's a very soothing gesture. And so for me, when I'm in a moment where I'm having a hard time, I need some compassion, that's just a very soothing gesture that I can give myself, like, that part of myself that's feeling activated. Okay, dear one, it's okay.
Hmm.
I'm here, right? We can offer that to ourselves because we're like every other mammal. We're like physical human beings, and our stress is a physical, real response. It's muscles tightening. It's blood flowing out of our extremities. It's our heart rate racing. So a lot of the things that when we start to notice we're stressed, and a lot of the things that we can do to it are actually through to help us calm down or through the body, rather than, we can't think ourselves out of it. Wouldn't that be nice if we could? We'd like to just be
Hmm.
like, I'd like to stop now, but we can't. And so we can use the body to help us
Yeah.
bring us back to equilibrium.
Hmm. I have found that helpful as well. My internal sensation of stress is tightening of the chest. That's my indicator. And when I just put my hand on my chest just to acknowledge first, and there's something about the acknowledgement and the touching of my hand to that tight spot that I just feel a little release, and it gives me enough
Hmm.
pause just to be in the moment and sit with it to try to get a little space from it before
Yeah.
moving on. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
I
that's the space, like that,
Mhm.
great psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, and his
Yes.
famous
Yeah.
quote, that's what he
Yes.
talks about. Like there's a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies our ability to choose, and in our ability to choose lies our growth and our freedom, something like that, right?
You did
And
it. I have it written right here. I was just gonna say it.
oh,
You nailed it. You nailed it.
I did it.
But yeah,
Yes.
you did. So important, right? That's where the free will is. And,
Mhm.
Dr. Viktor Frankl, one of the most impactful books I ever read was Man's Search for Meaning, where that probably came from, is if he can have that way of being in the Holocaust, right?
Mhm.
After, losing his family and seeing so many people perish in such awful circumstances, like, okay, I can get through this moment. I can get through this
Yeah.
tantrum, this bad day. And I just think not that anyone's, not to equate our pain and stress to other people. Everyone has their own, but it also helps to have that perspective of
Yeah.
more of an expansive, like, role model for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps to put it in that perspective for
Hmm.
sure. Yes.
I also wanted to comment on something you talk about, the rules, the three overarching rules in your home, and tell a quick story. So you said you have three overarching rules: take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and take care of our home. I love that. I love that. And it reminded me when our kids were young, I was off at a conference. My wife was home with our three young kids. Oh, you also you write about how you being a highly sensitive person, raising a highly sensitive child. Well, my wife are the same. Our three kids are the same. So um, it's a whole nother level of stuff that we could talk. Probably a whole other conversation about that. And I remember, so I'm at the conference, and I'm didn't know exactly which talk. I was very scheduled and all the talks I wanted to go to, and I had this like free period. So I go into this big auditorium. I think it was University of Kansas, presenting findings on what makes the happiest families. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. What makes the happiest families? So meanwhile, my wife is home with our three young kids. She had hired a home behavior consultant to come in to try to help us make some sense of our loud, melting down, sensitive family. And as I leave, I see on our kitchen window our paper and paper and paper of rule after rule after rule, all these rules that the parent coach had come up with. And I remember coming home from work and seeing them one day. And I was like, "Whoa, this is overwhelming." And so, anyways, the punchline is, what made the happiest family were the least amount of rules. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, okay, we only have 56 rules just in our kitchen alone right now, which is like not working. And what they talked about, and I actually, this is where I want to bring it together because this is my sense from what you're saying. They talked about minimal rules and highlighting family values. So I started to
Mhm.
use that in my work and with my family. And I feel like those rules are actually values, right? We take care of ourselves, we
Mhm.
take care of each other, and we take care of our home. And when people are treated with respect, and we talk about our family values or these three very important rules, it can really make a difference with the energy of the household. And
Mm.
I think
Mhm.
the potential calmness of a household versus like you need to follow all these rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about, like the rules, it really points to our expectations, of our kids. Like, if our expectation is for them to follow all these 56 rules perfectly, we
Yeah.
are going to be miserable
No. It
because
didn't work. It
kids
didn't work. No.
kids are gonna mess up. Kids are messy. They make mistakes. They're loud. They're annoying as they go about
Yeah.
meeting their needs, right? Like,
Yes.
so yeah, and that's, I think, an incredibly important thing is our expectations, right? Like, can we expect them to make mistakes? Can we give them permission to make mistakes as we give ourselves permission to make mistakes? Can we
Hmm.
remember that even adults need like a lot of repetition to learn something? I wish it didn't quite take quite as much repetition as it has taken in our house to learn how to put your backpack away when you come home.
Hmm. Yes. Yes.
But but ultimately, I'm glad I prioritized a strong relationship with my 13-year-old than
Yes.
like harping on her for her backpack every second of all the time. You know,
Yes.
I've done my
Yes.
share of harping on her, but at least it's not been every second of all the time, and it's
Yes.
okay for her to make some mistakes.
We so our lived experience with three out of the house, mostly out of the house, is no matter how many times you tell them to put away the glasses and pick up the stuff and put the stuff away, it like only seems to happen when they actually go live on their own, and and they're like, "Oh my god, my roommates are such a mess." And it's like there's this transformation that happens. It's amazing. Like we just smirk when it's amazing how it's sometimes hard to adopt those things in your own home, but what we're instilling it is going in. It just takes a while to
It takes some
internalize.
time.
Yes.
You're making
Yes.
me hopeful, Dr.
Yes.
Dan. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Someday
It,
the back
it
I
will
know, I think
happen.
about that. I mean, that's my mode of perspective right now is like, okay, like someday I'm going to have this like perfectly neat house that's going to
Yes.
be so boring
Yes.
because it's just going to be me and Bill and the
Yes.
animals, right?
Yes.
Like, and
Yes.
I have to kind of step back and say that to myself and remember, you know, that these right now my daughters are
Hmm.
13 and 16. I've got like
Yes.
maybe 2 years with them both here in the house,
Yes.
like left. I want them to
Right.
be as great as they can be. I don't want to just be like miserable because there are grapes left on the coffee table.
Yes. Oh, such a good perspective. And with I will say the clean house it's nice when that happens. And it comes at a cost, like you're saying, right? So clean house minus people, minus energy in the home, right? It just it flows, it ebbs and flows, and it's wonderful when they return home as well. So,
Hmm.
gosh,
It's a,
it gets back to the
it's a
moment,
good
right? Yeah,
it's a good argument for so just as like put in a few I have a few pieces in the book about sort of simplifying your life, and it's a
mm-hmm.
good argument for that, you know, kind of simplifying your stuff so it's not quite so hard to clean. Like let's just
Yes,
make it
yes,
easier to have less chaos. Like
yes,
that will help us enormously
right,
as far as the agency of over our environment, you know.
yes, absolutely. Okay, as we are starting to wind down here, what would you say? Because you are wonderful about these little moment by moment strategies, starting small, non striving. What's one thing you'd recommend to our listeners right now if they were just going to try one thing today?
I would recommend that you practice pausing. So I remember getting the advice from great parent coaches and it always started with number one, pause. And I'd be like, WTF? How am I supposed to do that? Like, this is so
Yeah.
frustrating.
You don't
So
understand what
I
she
found,
did. Yeah.
yeah, you don't understand. So the way to do this, the secret hack, is to practice pausing in the chill moments and in the calm moments. So practice pausing at bedtime. Practice pausing before you get in the car and you drive to drop off. Practice pause if your kid asks you for crackers, just take a breath or two before you respond. And it'll help you like be more present and stop like the going doing pause in the going doing mode. And B, it will help you with that pause muscle when you need it in the more difficult times. So I encourage you to practice pausing and then give yourself a lot of grace and compassion when you don't remember to pause later because it's
Hmm.
okay for you to make a mistake.
Hmm. Absolutely. And as you also point out in the book, a lot of meditating, whether it's informal or formal, is about being aware that your mind is drifting and pulling yourself back, or being aware that you reacted in a way that you would like to do it differently. So just that awareness
Mhm.
is part of this deal. Like, I mean, that is you're getting somewhere if you even have the awareness of, huh, I would have liked to do this differently, or I didn't pause long enough before I stepped back in.
Yeah, that's like the mindfulness bicep rep is your awareness is like, and if you
Yeah.
can practice doing that awareness with the attitudes of mindfulness are the attitudes of kindness and curiosity, which is the opposite of judgment and harshness, right? So, oh, I was like lost in a million places. Then we can just notice that with kindness and
Hmm.
curiosity. Isn't that interesting? That's your meditation bicep rep. Boom.
Yes.
You've
Yes.
done it.
A mentor of mine, you just said what was such a gift to me, told me years ago that saying when I was feeling very self-critical is, interesting I'm feeling like that right now.
Mm,
And just to say interesting in response to noticing, which you spoke of earlier, it just would dissipate some of that
mhm.
negative, critical energy and feeling, right? Just interesting I'm feeling that way right now. It's non-judgment, but you're
Yeah,
identifying it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that noticing something interrupts the autopilot pattern. It's
Mhm.
amazing how powerful it
Mhm.
is.
Okay, Hunter, it's time for the parent footprint moment question. Here we go. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual, as a parent, or even an awareness of your own parents, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your life, your kids, and or those you love.
Well, I remember when my daughter was little, it was bedtime, like bedtime being like one of the most difficult moments. And she was, it was one of those times where she was getting manic and excited at bedtime and like bouncing around like a tigger around her room. And I was like so done for the day. And I had been starting to put together these mindful parenting rules. So thankfully remembered sort of the principles that I teach. And I was like, okay, I can't do anything about her right now. I sat myself down on the floor and I did that. I put my hand to the heart and I just said, okay, I'm just going to breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. And I'm going to breathe in like a mountain and breathe out. And I feel more solid. Breathing in, I'm like a mountain. Breathing out, I feel solid. And my daughter was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so I'm just breathing to calm myself down. And she was like, okay, well, whatever. And then she climbed into my lap. And then we sat there and we breathed. And in this
Mm.
beautiful way, by like giving up my effort, giving up me trying to control her, and just like focusing on where I did have agency, like myself, then that was what was needed in that moment. Like she needed to feel just like our feelings are, our kids feel our feelings, we feel our kids' feelings, we inter with each other. And that's what was needed. And it wasn't like a big strategy for me, but it was like, oh, wow, look at the impact that this
Mhm.
me just taking care of me has on this
Yeah.
moment. And that was really, really an aha for me.
Yeah. And you were doing it for you, and yet you were modeling it for your daughter. And it gets back to this whole idea of a lot of our parenting stress and pressure is to like do something to or with our kids, when in reality, if we're actually focusing on being mindful ourselves, being regulated ourselves, modeling healthy behavior, it that is parenting. And that
Mm-hmm.
does transmit down to our kids.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful.
Well, Hunter, thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation today and sharing your wisdom. Your book is full of wisdom. Everyone, Raising Good Humans Every Day, 50 Simple Ways to Press Pause, Stay Present, and Connect with Your Kids. Tell everyone where they can obviously find this book, find your previous book. You have a summit happening soon. This will be launching just after your summit. I imagine there'll still be information that everyone can find. So please let us all know.
Sure. You can find me online at mindfulmamamentor.com. And you can find Raising Good Humans and Raising Good Humans everywhere books are sold. And we have an awesome summit that I've been doing with the publisher New Harbinger, where, you can get a copy for yourself, get a copy for a friend, get access to this, amazing summit with some of my favorite speakers that I was so honored to get to talk to. And tell me what you think. I'd love to connect with you if you want to just send me a shout out or whatever. I'm at Instagram at Mindful Mama Mentor.
And
the Mindful Mama podcast. Sorry,
of course.
Gotta mention that.
Sorry.
This is a podcast. Come on over.
Yeah, you just have 400 and some odd podcasts for everyone to listen to. You guys,
it's
a wonderful podcast. Definitely go listen to get more of Hunter and her amazing guests. And I have to say, on the forward of your book, to have Dr. Shefali write the forward, that's I know someone who I've always admired and respected, and a leader in our conscious, mindful parenting space. So that was awesome.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you, Shefali.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please share this episode with everyone who you know will benefit. Thank you for being a part of our community and bringing your loved ones and friends into it. Thank you for your 5-star reviews. They make a difference. Do your best to be that person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummer Man, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.